This is Defending Utah Radio on K-Talk 1640, every Saturday at 1. To learn more about Defending Utah or to become an activist member, visit defendingutah.org.
This Defending Utah program was brought to you by the Defending Utah Liberty Store, where you can buy, among other things, the United States Constitution Made Easy by Lonnie Crockett, Ph.D. It was also brought to you by Anderson Accounting, 801-255-0396. Trust Plumbing, 801-808-5470. Higher Calling Firearms, highercallingfirearms.com. Mini Zoo comes to you, 801-414-5279. American Appliance, 801-254-2566. The Editor Lady at gmail.com. Shem Financial Services, 801-856-6151. The Law Offices of Garrett T. Smith, 385-439-0247. Welcome back to Defending Utah Radio. This is Ben McClintock with Enoch Moore. And Defending Utah, we think right and wrong, not right and left. And we are really excited to have our special guest on that we have this week, Ammon Bundy, who should need no introduction. Thank you, Ammon, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, glad to. We hope to have this as a regular thing. I think it's really important that that you're able to come on and let people understand exactly what it was that the government was so afraid of. What was it that you were teaching that had them so scared that the virus was going to spread, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they tried their best to not allow us to continue to spread that message.
Yep. Yeah, they sure have tried to silence you several different ways. Last week we had on Jeanette Finicum, and she brought up an interesting point that I thought people would want to hear about. Maybe what happened to you as well. She said that the truck that they were driving when Lavoie was murdered, they still haven't received that back yet. And I was curious if anything that you guys had confiscated, if you've been able to get all of your property back, or what's the progress with that?
Yeah, I haven't received anything. They took, everything that I had in my possession, everything that I had, with me, including my wedding ring, and I've still never received nothing back. And actually, to be honest with you, I don't expect or even believe that I'll ever see it again.
Wow. Have they given a reason behind not giving you your wedding ring back? Is that pretty dangerous material, or?
Well, I don't know what I'd do with it, but I don't know what dangerous I could do with it, but maybe marriage just in itself is dangerous to them. I don't know.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow. So nothing has been. Wow, that's just amazing that people that have been found innocent twice can't get their property back.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story that happened long before this, because people have to realize that, we're dealing with modern-day robbers. I mean, they're the plunderers of this generation, if you will, or this century, and people haven't woken up and seen really what's going on, and, they're not aware. But, it's the same thing happening over again, and these people are the modern day robbers. They're the same type of people that our founders had to deal with, and many other generations have had to deal with.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. You look at not to wax too religious, but you look at the scriptures and the Gadianton robbers and how they gained sole control of the government. It wasn't just these random, gangs or the mafia. It's the people that were in charge of the government.
No, if you go to, I would recommend reading Helaman 7 and 8. I think that sums up very closely what's happening right now with our government.
Exactly.
And I won't try to paraphrase it because it's said much better in the scriptures than I could ever say it. But if people want to know what is happening and what our government is becoming and has become, than read in Helaman 7 and 8. And it's the exact same thing. It's the very same thing that we've experienced, and that I am afraid many others will experience as well.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we're definitely seeing that. So we've had you on before, and I kind of want to make this almost like a series where we've talked about, or had you talk about natural law. What is it that liberty actually is, and what it isn't. And I'd like to kind of continue that conversation. These are the things that you were talking about, as well as maybe even having a chance to sometime this hour get into the Declaration of Independence that you guys were organizing ranchers to take part in, to declare their independence from the BLM. But kind of before we get to that, let's help people understand some of these principles that lead us to helping them understand that they have the right to do that.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a little background, and we at the refuge, when we went in there and we began to educate. That's what we were doing in there. They wanted to call it an armed insurrection,
right,
which it absolutely was not. But we were putting on seminars, people from all over. It first started, people from Harney County there, and then the news started, they started spreading, and then we got surrounding counties, and then we started getting surrounding states, and we were getting representatives from all over the western United States coming there, and they were going through our seminars. And we were teaching them basically natural law. We were teaching them common law of basically what their rights are and what has happened, and what we have to do to maintain and defend our rights.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the FBI and I'm sure several other alphabet agencies sent informants to the refuge, which we knew and assumed that they were there, but everybody was welcome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we even had an elementary, not the whole class, but students came and did reports on on us and what we were teaching.
Oh, wow.
And so, anyway, these informants went back and, of course, reported to their superiors on what it was we were teaching. And it literally put the fear in them, because we were teaching what is necessary to maintain freedom, and it's exactly opposite of what they are and what they have become, and again, what our government has become. And so later we didn't find out, but of course we know what happened. What I mean by later, we didn't find out that there was quite a bit of communication back and forth among the higher levels of the bureaucracies in the state and the federal government. And they were communicating, and in one of the emails that we discovered in actually our discovery for our trial, we found that it was an email between Governor Brown of Oregon, the FBI, and several others, and they said that the virus was spreading,
mm-hmm,
and that it had to be stopped. And this was 2 days before they ambushed us in going over to Grant County,
mm-hmm,
and put a dead man's block and killed Lavoie.
yeah.
And so it's very clear what they were doing. The virus is basically the truth, the message that we were sharing. To them, of course, they have to consider it as a deadly virus,
Right.
and they had to stop it. And the way they stopped it was through force. And I, pondered about that quite a bit. And basically, what happened there was a bunch of, I don't want to say it too demeaning in the sense towards us, but pretty much, a bunch of country boys,
mm-hmm,
who understood these principles, these true principles, taught in the gospel of Jesus Christ and the scriptures very clearly, and that our founders taught and many others have taught, we begin to understand these things, and we begin to teach them. And the most powerful government known to man couldn't intellectually combat them, and they tried. They tried to take the narrative. They tried misinformation campaigns. They could not get the people to sway their way. And so what did they do? They used force like a big bully.
Mm-hmm.
And they killed a good man, and then they put us in prison for almost 2 years. And so that's kind of a little bit of background. So, now what were we teaching?
So what were you teaching that was the virus? What was so threatening to them about what you were saying?
Yeah, and I wish I had the time to really go through, each and every step and process that we were, or principle that we were teaching. Mm-hmm. But we started off with life. We started off with the creation of this world, and we began to, help people understand that God created this world for man. We used the scriptures. We used evidence of that, and God gave man his life. And because God gave man his life, and because man has life, man has to have a place to live, and he has to have a way to provide for himself. He has to have a way to have self-preservation, and because of that, he has a right to property. And we began to go down through this process with these individuals and helping them to see with their own hearts and with their own minds of what was right and how our systems of protection of these rights, starting with life, have been hijacked by these modern-day robbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you want to go into them a little bit more, but I'm being
We're
pretty
going to be heading off
here.
to a break, so I think this is a good spot to kind of just hold off and until we get back from the break. This is Ben McClintock from the Defending Utah radio program. We're talking to Ammon Bundy and getting into some of the things, those principles that the government found so dangerous when we get back right from the break.
Tyrannical government. Defending Utah knows how to fix that. It's called nullification. To find out more, stop by our office and pick up your pamphlet on nullification today. DefendingUtah.org. Think right and wrong, not right and left. Can't get enough Defending Utah radio? Then follow us on Facebook and subscribe to Defending Utah's YouTube channel. DefendingUtah.org. Think right and wrong, not right and left.
Welcome back to Defending Utah Radio. This is Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore from DefendingUtah.org, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. And we have Ammon Bundy with us talking about the things that the government was so afraid of, the principles that they were teaching at the Militia Refuge in Oregon, and those things that they were applying themselves with their own family in Nevada. And so thanks so much for joining us, Ammon. Ammon, you still there? So
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now. Great, perfect.
Oh,
Thank
there
you.
we go. Okay.
Great.
Good.
So yeah, thanks for coming on again and talking to us about these principles, and then really getting into talking about how we apply them. So before we went off to the break, you kind of gave an overview of some of those natural laws that you were teaching from the scriptures and from history of our founding fathers, and how just a few short days before they ambushed you guys and they assassinated Lavoie, they were calling it a virus that needed to be stopped because you guys had so many people coming out. I would have loved to have seen the reports that these students that you said came to listen to you. What was the report said?
Yeah, it was very interesting. Of course, I didn't get to see those reports myself because I was arrested before that could happen. One thing, again, just kind of to emphasize on that, it was individuals that came from all over, and when they heard this message that we were presenting, they got very excited and took it to, their communities, and then that's why we were invited to these communities, and that's where we were headed when they ambushed us. We were invited to the first meeting, in Grant County, Oregon, and from my understanding, there's 300 or 400 people there, including the sheriff that was wanting to hear our message, and it was organized by several individuals that had come to the refuge and participated in our presentation, and then came back again, listened to it, and they actually came back a third time because they felt it was so important that they understood it, and then bring it back to their communities. And that week that we were ambushed and Lavoie was killed, we had meetings in Grant County, Ontario County, multiple places in Ontario County, and then we had another kind of a nuts and bolts meeting in Harney County. And of course the FBI knew about this and they had to stop it. So enough of that, but some of these principles, we literally started with, again, like I said, life, and that life was granted to us by God. We've followed the Declaration of Independence, where it lists that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these rights are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And that's kind of where we began. And we began to draw a very clear understanding of this right to life and what it truly means. And I wish I could go into detail over the radio, but we don't have enough time. So I got to give some examples, I think. And I'll give you one example. I spent a tremendous amount of time in the hole when I was in prison because I wouldn't comply, and my brother was there with me most of the time, and we weren't the only one, but after several months of this, a U.S. Marshal came to my door, and he began to speak through the door, and he must have been somewhat of a religious individual, which I think is unusual for them. Well, I know is unusual for them, and he began to tell me basically how what I was doing, not complying and submitting to them, was scripturally wrong. And he began to try to, basically read the Bible to me in very selective verses of how I was wrong by not submitting to him. And I allowed it to go on for a while. And here I am, literally, tore away from my family, my life. I haven't seen my kids, which my little baby and my little girls and all of that. Got 6 kids, young children. I haven't seen them for now at this time for over a year and a half, including my wife. And I could go on. And he's reading scripture to me about how I have a duty to comply to him.
Wow.
And then after some time, I let him go, and then I asked him this question. And this is the point I'm trying to make to your listeners, to everybody listening. Did God create me so that you could tell me what to do? So I have to be submissive to you? Did God create me for that and then you for something different?
Yeah.
Because that's what he was implying. And I that was the only way I felt like he would even consider anything coming out of my mouth.
That's exactly the tyrannical mindset of the divine right of kings mindset that they had in Europe, and that the founding fathers were so opposed to.
That's exactly right. And that's what it really comes down to. And that was the first thing that we were teaching. And I made sure he understood very clearly in a reasonable manner that God did not create me so that you could tell me and force me to do things. He didn't create me so that you could put me in a box and keep me away from my family and my children and my wife and my home and my living. He didn't create me so that you could do that to me. And he created us equal. And that is, in a lot more detail, one of the first things that we laid down, that man is not designed to be subject to other men. No man is designed to be subject to another man.
Mm-hmm.
And we went from there. And how do we show that in the Scriptures? How do we show that in life? And the Scriptures make it very clear in both the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and even hints of it in the Pearl of Great Price that well, actually very solid in there as well, that God gave man his agents.
Right.
Well, what does that mean? I mean, does that not mean that he made it so that we can choose unto ourselves? Does not, and so if you believe that, does that not mean that other men do not have a right to choose for us?
He made us agents unto ourselves to act and not be acted upon.
That's right, to act and not be acted upon. And what does that mean? And so we began to, again, lay those foundations and put practical, real life examples to that. And then, and also apply what it means to when it comes to property, and including your body, that your body is your property,
mm-hmm.
and that you have a right to control it. And as long as you do not inflict or harm anybody else's rights, then you should be free to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We then took it from there. We began to talk about land. We began to talk about how, we backed it way up into history, where there was people began to, first organize kind of in families, if you will. They began to use the land. They began to prosper off the land. They began to benefit from what is called the increase of the earth. And that's how basically all wealth is derived from, by actually taking the natural resources of the earth and through labor making something out of it. And then what happened was there was certain families, or even as time went on, there began to be cities that became more wealthy than others because of their ability to take the natural resources, and because of their work ethic, they began to actually prosper more. And then there was other groups of individuals that began to organize themselves to take the wealth that these families or cities had, or individuals. What I mean by that these other individuals had worked hard to create. And so what you had was a situation where people were out working in their fields, and they were busy, or they were mining, or they were grazing their cattle. They were busy actually producing and working and providing food and providing whatever it was that they were doing. They were busy doing that. And these other individuals they would come with their swords and they would take it. And they would plunder.
Mm-hmm.
And that became quite a problem, because in order for them they were put in a very precarious situation. Because in order for them to prosper, they had to work in their fields. But in order for them to defend themselves, they had to leave their field and prepare for war and prepare to defend themselves. And therefore, they weren't able to be in their fields. So it actually would cause poverty or less wealth, because of this constant battle of not being able to, or this balance, let's say this constant balance of having to defend their rights and still produce and prosper. And so we look at what they had to do, mm-hmm. what they began to do. And we look at some very early times and their wisdom and what they decided that they would do to be able to allow most of the people to go and produce and prosper and create wealth and the pursuit of happiness and still be protected. And the way they did this was they took a small percentage of the individuals in their community, and they paid them. They paid them to defend them and to organize themselves and to keep a watchful eye out for those that were to plunder. And this was, it was just a small percentage, just a couple percent of what, but they made sure that these individuals who were the defenders, if you will, they made sure that they were fed. They made sure that they had the resources that they need to be able to defend. Mm-hmm. And really, what it was just a few individuals that it was their full-time job to prepare everybody else for the time if these plunderers would come over and try to take what these people have.
I think what you're touching on here is really important, because this is the fine line between lawlessness and the rule of the mob, and then and total government is what when is it plunder to have the community pay for that service. So when we come back from the break that we need to go to real quick, we're going to get more into that distinction and the importance of that common defense, but then making sure that we don't cross into the line of legal plunder. This is Ben McClintock talking to Ammon Bundy on the Defending Utah radio program.
Tired of bureaucrats and tyrannical government? Defending Utah knows how to fix that. It's called nullification. To find out more, stop by our office and pick up your pamphlet on nullification today. DefendingUtah.org. Think right and wrong, not right and left. Can't get enough Defending Utah radio? Then follow us on Facebook and subscribe to Defending Utah's YouTube channel. DefendingUtah.org. Think right and wrong, not right and left.
And we are back on the Defending Utah radio program. This is Ben and Enoch from DefendingUtah.org, where we think right and wrong, not right and left. And we are just so glad to have Ammon Bundy joining us this week. Thanks for being on with us, Ammon.
Absolutely.
So when we went to the break, you were talking about how when these communities were formed, they got together and they hired people to protect them. Maybe we would consider the sheriff, and and how it was necessary to fund them. And so I think this might be an area where some people get confused, where they say, well, if plunder is wrong, then why is it okay to force my neighbor to fund the police. So I wanted you to kind of get into that and kind of distinguishing and helping people understand this core principle that's so vital.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we could work through part of it anyway. So you're exactly right. In fact, the one of the first actual forms of this I'm talking about, you see, and they call them the share reef, or the share of the reef, and it ended up being, we call him the sheriff now. Mm-hmm. And what was his duty? His duty was to basically, his job was to defend the rights of the people, to defend their property. That was pretty much what his job was, and he was there to basically organize and to, if he had to, a posse that could be strong enough to defend. And he was given the resources and the ability to do that. And that was done by community and by family, and depending on the situation. Of course, they weren't always called sheriffs, and in many cases, at the beginning, they didn't really have our names. And so, but that was the process that we began to educate people in really what happened. And it was a full voluntary system. That's one thing that people need to understand, is meaning that if someone didn't want to pay this individual to defend his rights, then they did not have to. But they also didn't get the benefit of that service, if you will. And that was in a more organized, community, if you will. And but it was a very volunteer type of situation. Mm-hmm. Now, what you begin to see is where these individuals, and you see this over and over again, these individuals that were charged to actually defend, organize, and protect the people, that they began to be, they began to, basically, their organizations, if you will, began to grow. They began to have more influence. They began to get titles and names. They began to, seek more money, more funds, and to grow their defense personnel and organization and funds. Mm-hmm. And then you see where they began to force the very people that organize them and give them power to defend, force them to give more than what they were happy to give. Mm-hmm. And it became a situation where those that were actually charged to defend actually became the ones that took the most from those that they were charged to defend.
They became the thing that they were supposed to protect the people against.
Exactly. So, what were they protecting? Or what were they protecting against? Plunderers coming and taking the property, life, and liberty and property of the people.
Now, I wanted a point of maybe clarification or just expounding, and let me know if I'm getting this out of order. But how is this linked to like the constitutional militia, as well as what the founding fathers used of these committees of safety, and that were also used during the war for independence that Texas used in their war for independence from Mexico?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think I can answer somewhat. But the founders saw this pattern and this cycle of those that were charged to protect end up being in power, then they end up usurping that power, and they end up being really the ones that were the worst takers. And so they were always wanting to limit those that were charged to be in, to defend the people. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways that is very clear in much of the founders' teachings is these principles of distribution of powers. And I will hopefully answer your question in this process. But the idea that the best way to keep power from being misused and abused is to distribute them to the individuals and to the local governments as closely to the people as possible, including land. Because we know that land and the natural resources are what creates true wealth, and it is what it creates. It's where all wealth derives from. So, in order to keep that wealth from being abused and to keep it from being used against the people, the safest place is to distribute it among the individuals, among the families, and so that everybody has some wealth and it's not consolidated into one body. And you see what we see here, just kind of getting off just a little bit, we see in our society now, in our governments and these bureaucracies, in almost every aspect of what's happening, we see that there is an effort to consolidate powers into one body. And
absolutely, every time.
That is a very deliberate strategy that those who want to take power away from the people have basically played on the people. And they've done it because they need to be able to consolidate powers in order to be able to control it. So, kind of backing up, to answer your questions, the same thing was with this defense. There obviously needed to be a defense. It's important that we defend against criminals and those plunderers that would, whether it's local or whether it's from another country, or it's important that we defend ourselves against these criminals. But if we put the power into one body, let's say for national defense, then we're risking it being taken over, becoming like a coup, right? Taken over, and the wrong people getting in control of, say, this massive military force and resources. And so they clearly believed that the answer was militia. And who was the militia? Every able-bodied man, and then now legally it's every able-bodied man and woman between the ages, I believe, 18 and I want to say 46 or something. That's actually the legal definition in the United States. And basically making a defender of liberty every individual in the United States. And so you think about this, and then there would just be certain representatives, certain individuals who were paid to just make sure that these, and you go into, I'll talk about that in just a little second, that these individuals were basically there to fund, organize, not even organize, fund, train, and then the states were to organize. And so they even separated those powers of who would fund it, who was supposed to make sure that they were trained, and then who was supposed to actually organize it. They were separated. But there was the individual person that was had the duty and the charge to defend. And that's a distribution of power. And to kind of give you an example of that, I was just talking to my wife just the other day about this effort to take guns away from the American people.
Right.
And really from anybody in the in the world, from the individuals in the world is really what they're trying to do. Well, if you're, say, a socialist or a communist, right? And I guess we got to come back to this.
No. We're actually we've got about a minute and a half left. The computer jumped the gun, so
Okay. So let's just say if you want to come and take over the United States, or you have a reason to want to take control of the power of the United States or its resources or its land. There's something that you got to do first. You got to disarm the 330 million people that are in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Because 330 million people is a very large army.
Right.
And if every one of them is charged to defend their own life, liberty, and property, and there's a little organization of how to do that, there is not a nation in this world, even combined together, that can defeat that.
Right.
And they know that. And so what are they doing? They're trying to disarm us. They're trying to consolidate the power of defense into one body and make it so that the distribution of this power is no more, so therefore those people cannot defend themselves.
That's a really important point, and I hate to cut you off, but we're right out of time. This has been Ammon Bundy on the Defending Utah radio program with Ben McClintock and Enoch Moore. We want to have you on more to be able to. This is kind of like we'd like to have just a series of lessons for people to be able to help make these principles popular again. So thanks so much, and we'll see you guys, everybody, next week. This Defending Utah program was brought to you by the Defending Utah Liberty Store, where you can buy, among other things, the United States Constitution Made Easy by Lonnie Crockett, Ph.D. It was also brought to you by Anderson Accounting, 801-255-0396. Trust Plumbing, 801-808-5470. Higher Calling Firearms, highercallingfirearms.com. Mini Zoo comes to you, 801-414-5279. American Appliance, 801-254-2566. The Editor Lady at gmail.com. Shem Financial Services, 801-856-6151. The Law Offices of Garrett T. Smith, 385-439-0247.